Excellent. So welcome to the webinar today. We're going to go through getting started with ePublishing. And let's take a look quickly at the agenda today. So we're going to look at online publishing. What is it? Why do you want to look at this topic? What some of the approaches and solutions are. We will give you a bit of an introduction to our ePublishing solutions and tell you just a little bit about INM so you know the context as to why we're presenting this topic today. And we'll look at some next steps in moving forward and getting your project started. When we look at ePublishing, I think it's important to look at what the definition we're talking about is. So traditionally in the publishing world, when people had content that they wanted to put online, it was usually converted into one of three types of formats. It was made available online as a PDF, it was converted over to HTML and made available in a different format, or it was converted to something like the Open eBook Forum initiative content format. So that is how content has traditionally been published online. But there are a new wave of different solutions that are available in the market today that help get content online in a more streamlined process and more effective way. We're going to look at those later here in the presentation. But I think it's important to look at what the motivation is for publishers to come online. You know, certainly if you're attending the session here today, you've got an interest in this topic. So, you know, one of the elements that I thought was kind of interesting was ePublishing as a concept was named as one of the top 10 technology trends for 2010 by CNN. So definitely it's something that is on people's minds today. And the Magazine Publishers Association of America has seen a 10% increase year over year in digital projects, with about 76 new initiatives in the first quarter of 2009 alone. And the figures for 2009, the rest of the year, in 2010, the beginning of the year, are even more compelling. I've seen a few quick snippets, but those numbers usually take a little while to get out, so they're not completely available. But what's really clear here is this is a trend in the industry, and this is something that your competitors are doing. Now, some of the motivation for publishing online, you know, I think most of you in the publishing sector definitely understand what the state of the industry is, that across the board there are lower subscription numbers for publications, that advertising revenue is lower, and it's much more competitive to get. So, you know, looking online as a way to increase your readership is a very compelling option because there are really no boundaries, and the cost aspect of it is quite simple to absorb in terms of coming online with your content. In terms of advertising revenue, it offers you something unique that you can offer your advertisers, and it offers a broader audience online and more additional value for your advertising partners. It certainly does address some of the competition challenges as well. If your peers are headed online, it's something that you can do as well very simply and cost effectively. And the technology that is available to bring your solutions online today is certainly much easier to access, much more cost effective to bring forth, and certainly provides better features than it ever has. When we look again at some of the motivations for moving online, you know, certainly the numbers are very compelling, specifically in the B2B publication market. Now, I did see at the beginning of our session, I put up a quick poll just to see with our audience today whether we had a higher concentration of business-to-business or business-to-consumer publishers, and I see that we do have a higher concentration today of business-to-consumer. So all these stats are definitely relevant for you. Business to consumer is even more compelling when we're talking about the digital subscription base. So for titles that offered an online version or a digital version of their title, they were able to grow their subscription base by about 143%. And if you're interested in the sources for any of these stats, please feel free to ping me after the webinar. I'd be happy to share those with you. If we're looking at audience, you know, certainly business to business is one end of the scope here, and one of the things that publishers often bring up as a question when they're considering publishing online is my audience ready for this, and is my audience the right target for this? And a lot of publishers seem to think that it's really the younger generation that's looking to access content online. But that has been proven wrong a couple of different times by organizations doing polls of online readers. And it was quite surprising for me to see that the median age for business-to-business publications was 45. And if we take into consideration both domains, business-to-business and business-to-consumer, that age is still quite relevant at 41.6 years. So it's more than the younger population that is looking to access and read. If we're looking at some of those reasons in a little bit more detail, one certainly is reader engagement. And reader engagement plays into this from two sides. One is really getting your audience engaged with your publication from a content perspective, where they are accessing your content and reading that content. And two is reader engagement from an advertising perspective. So if you have a very dedicated audience that regularly reads your title and that accesses your digital subscriptions, then that can be a very compelling argument for bringing advertisers online with your magazine. So if we look at reader engagement, certainly 90% of readers have said that they're either satisfied or very satisfied with their experience in reading their digital magazine online. And if we look at engagement, typically when you get a magazine in the mail, you may put it aside and get to it when you have a chance, but a whopping 92% read their digital subscriptions in the same week they received it, which is much, much higher than print publications. And readers have reported reading 3 out of 4 of the latest issues. Certainly in print you may or may not get to every single issue of your magazine. When we're talking about reader engagement in terms of advertising opportunities, it's really important to see that readers of print content online, with the digital versions, are far more likely to pay attention to advertisements than they do in the print publication. Now, that could be because it's a new medium and because people are paying particular attention to the delivery of that content, but regardless, the bottom line is that they do, which is great from an advertising perspective. And the cost of making those publications available online is so minimal compared to the advertising return you can get. So for no additional effort for taking a magazine that exists today in print and has a dedicated following from advertisers, bringing that online, you can charge about another 10 to 15% premium on that advertising. So it definitely outweighs the cost of bringing that online. If we look at cost savings as well, when we're talking about expanding your market and expanding your reader base, expanding it online is certainly a more economical way to do that. If we're talking about a print magazine, you're talking about $1 per unit cost on that magazine to produce it, to distribute it, etc. The same magazine delivered online can be somewhere around 25 cents per unit, just a fraction of the cost. And when we're talking about margins, online certainly has a much higher margin, at almost double the margins of print, so between 60 and 70% margin. So if you're trying to build your audience and increase your readership and your subscription base, it's very logical that doing that online delivers significant results. And if we look at another element in terms of benefits of publishing online, the environmental benefit is certainly one that rings true with a lot of readers. It's the #1 reason that many people cite for accessing content online is the environmental impact. As a society, we are moving toward ways that we can minimize our footprint, and certainly the print industry, although it delivers a significant amount of information and benefit to the community, it certainly is a bit of a toll on the environment, especially when you look at the numbers of 12 billion magazines printed in the US per year, and only nearly 70% of those issues are never sold. So there's a lot of unnecessary waste in the printing sector, and moving some titles online or portions of titles online to make available to users cuts that usage of environmental resources, as well as the greenhouse gas effect of transporting those materials across the globe. So if you are looking at a title that's available to a broad audience internationally, making available some portion of that online will certainly make a significant impact. If we look at the e-publishing industry, that pretty much covers most of the benefit angles of it. What's important to look at, I think, now is some of the approaches to e-publishing. And as the e-publishing industry has grown online, there's been a few different trends toward the direction for creating online content. Initially that push was really done through the concept of recreating and repurposing content. So taking stories from a magazine or a journal or another type of publication and making those available in an HTML format on a website, and maybe free and available to a general audience or behind a login and accessible on a website. That was one approach, and that's still happening today for some publishers, but there are certainly some challenges in doing that because you really create two different channels for your content, one that's very print-based and one that's very web-based. The second angle was taking that print content that you have available today and converting it somehow into more interactive content for the web. So there were a lot of conversion services and organizations that came forth with the pitch of, I'll take your publication for you and let me do a conversion to bring it over to Flash, to Shockwave, or something of that nature, some form of interactive display for the web. And that became fairly popular, but those conversion services typically were quite expensive in the sense that you'd have to pay each time you had an issue. The process took some time, and you couldn't just take your publication and make it available in a matter of days, minutes even. It was something that needed to be built into the process. Then came a wave of packaged software solutions, and those software solutions, you'd buy a box of software, install it, and then you'd take your document that you would go to print with, and it would do some form of traditional conversion process to give you a format that would be available online. So whether that happened to be a PDF format or an interactive PDF or some other form of proprietary technology, that's something that you got a file, and then you take that file and hand it to your webmaster, and your webmaster would put that up on your website. And that's certainly another approach that worked for many organizations. The challenge there is there's some questions around proprietary technology, and you are stuck hosting that. So you've got to account for the bandwidth, you've got to account for the volume, and to make sure that that's up and running on your site. The last wave of solutions that have been fairly popular in the industry is what we call software as a service offerings, or SaaS is the common abbreviation for that. And that's where an organization has the ability to take your publication and host it for you and make it available to you through the web, either through a hyperlink or in an email or some other embedded format. So that's hosted. It appears to be hosted on your website, but it is pointing to a site that's managed, backed up, and configured from an organization that has experience in doing large-scale content delivery. So the software as a service offering is another approach. So these are all fairly available today. So if you're looking at how to get online with your content, there are different options available, and depending on what your needs are, one may be better for you than the next. We won't push you in one direction, but we'll certainly give you the options so you can make the decision of what makes sense for you. And certainly when we're talking about the type